He just wanted to help, stopped on the side of the road to shelter an exhausted woman and her son. But what started as a gesture of kindness turned his life upside down. They hid more than pain. And one day, the truth knocked on his door. Subscribe. And write in the comments, where are you watching us from? The heat pulsed off the asphalt in waves, making the horizon shimmer like a dream half remembered. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called once, then again, its cry hollow and dissonant against the empty silence of the highway. Dust clung to the air like a second skin, and the smell of engine oil, burnt rubber, and metal hung heavy in the stifling summer afternoon. Alicia Carter sat rigid behind the wheel of a battered silver sedan that had seen better decades. Her knuckles were white where they gripped the steering wheel, her jaw set so tightly it looked like it might crack. The air conditioner had given out miles ago, and beads of sweat trailed down her temple, sticking strands of hair to her skin. Her eyes, dark and sharp, scanned the endless road ahead, but her mind was somewhere else, caught in the echoes of a conversation she wished she could forget. "You know how kids are," the principal had said, smiling that polite, condescending smile that made Alicia want to scream. "Boys' roughhouse, you can't take everything so personally." Her son had come home with a swollen eye, a split lip, and silence etched across his face like a scar. He hadn't cried, he hadn't spoken, and when she tried to coax it out of him, he just muttered, "They said I don't belong." That was 3 days ago. Now they were somewhere in the flat expanse of the rural Midwest, the map on her dashboard marked only by circles and question marks. She didn't know exactly where they were going, only that they were leaving, that they had to. She'd sold her furniture, closed her accounts, packed what little they owned, and walked out. No goodbyes, no regrets, just her and Carter and the road. In the passenger seat, her 8-year-old son sat quietly, legs drawn up under him, his chin resting on the edge of the window frame. He wore a faded red t-shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on it, and clutched a small fabric rabbit with one ear missing. The rabbit had a name, Mr. Buttons, but Carter hadn't spoken it aloud in months. His eyes, wide and watchful, flicked from the road to the passing trees to the sky, as if searching for a sign. Something safe. Something familiar. The car lurched suddenly, a sharp jolt that made Alicia's stomach clench. The dashboard lights flickered, then dimmed. A low grinding noise came from the engine, followed by a puff of smoke from under the hood. She cursed under her breath, pulling the car to the shoulder of the road. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as the vehicle coasted to a reluctant stop, shuddered once, and died. Alicia sat there for a moment, both hands still on the wheel, her heart hammering against her ribs. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not here. She glanced at Carter, who looked back at her with wide, frightened eyes. She forced a smile that didn't reach her mouth. "It's okay," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We'll figure it out." She popped the hood and stepped out into the heat, instantly regretting the decision. The air outside was even hotter than inside the car, and it pressed down on her chest like a weight. The engine hissed and steamed as she lifted the hood and waved the smoke away. She had no idea what she was looking at, just wires and metal and the unmistakable smell of something very, very wrong. She coughed, backed away, and leaned against the car, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. The road stretched out in both directions, empty and endless. No towns, no signs, no shade, just a few scattered trees and the low hum of insects. Carter had gotten out too. He stood beside her, his hand slipping into hers. She squeezed it, trying not to show how terrified she felt. Her throat was dry, her head throbbing from the heat. Her knees wobbled slightly beneath her. "We need help," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She reached into the car for her phone and stared at the screen. No service. Of course. Minutes passed, then an hour. The sun continued its relentless crawl across the sky, baking the car, the road, the earth. Alicia felt lightheaded. She leaned against the side of the car, then slid down to sit on the gravel, her breath coming shorter. Her vision swam. Carter sat beside her, his small hand patting her arm, unsure what else to do. "I'm okay," she whispered, but she wasn't. The last thing she saw before the world blurred to black was her son's face, frightened and brave, as he stood up and stepped toward the road. Carter didn't cry. He didn't call out. He just stood near the edge of the road, clutching Mr. Buttons in one hand, the other raised, palm out, waving slowly at every distant vehicle that appeared and disappeared in shimmering heat waves. Most sped past. A few slowed, then moved on. He counted them like heartbeats. Then came the growl of an engine that didn't fade. It grew louder, closer, and a shadow fell across the road as a large 18-wheeler eased into view, slowing before it even reached them. The truck stopped, brakes hissing like a warning. Carter stepped back, afraid. The door opened, and a man climbed down. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with rough hands and a beard flecked with gray. His face was sun-weathered, his eyes light. He wore a faded plaid shirt and dusty jeans. He looked like someone from a movie, someone Alicia would have avoided without hesitation. But Carter didn't run. He just stood there. The man crouched, keeping his distance. "Hey," he said gently, "are you okay?" Carter nodded once. "Is that your mom?" the man asked, pointing toward the still figure by the car. Another nod. The man stood slowly, walked over, and knelt beside Alicia. He checked her pulse, tilted her head back slightly, then looked around. There was no one else in sight. He walked back to his truck, grabbed a cooler, and returned with a bottle of water, a clean cloth, and a small first aid kit. He poured some water onto the cloth and dabbed Alicia's forehead. Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't wake. He looked at Carter. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe," he said, "just until she's better, okay?" Carter hesitated, then nodded. The man lifted Alicia carefully, carrying her like she weighed nothing. Carter opened the passenger door to the truck, climbing in silently. The man placed Alicia on the bench seat, buckled her in gently, then shut the door and climbed behind the wheel. The engine rumbled to life, and they pulled away from the roadside, the broken car shrinking in the side mirror until it disappeared. It took an hour to reach the place. The truck turned off the main road and followed a narrow dirt path through a cluster of trees. A small cabin came into view, tucked between the woods and a gravel clearing. It had a porch with a wooden swing, a chimney that leaned slightly, and flower boxes with long dead stems. The man parked the truck, climbed out, and opened the door for Carter. "My name's Noah," he said simply. Carter nodded, not offering his. Noah carried Alicia inside, laying her on a worn couch in the main room. He covered her with a blanket and placed a pillow under her head. Carter stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes wide. His rabbit hung limply in one hand. Noah knelt beside him. "She's gonna be okay," he said. He pointed to a small shelf lined with books and toys. "You can look around if you want. There's food in the kitchen. Take anything." Carter didn't move. Noah didn't push. He simply stood and walked to the stove, lighting a fire. The cabin filled with the scent of wood smoke and warmth. Outside, the sky darkened and the wind picked up, rustling the leaves like a soft warning. Inside, for the first time in a long time, there was stillness. Not fear, not noise, just stillness. And somewhere, buried deep inside Carter's chest, something uncoiled. It was the smallest flicker of hope. It was the first breath of something new. It was the beginning. The cabin was quiet except for the occasional creak of the settling wood and the low hiss of the fire crackling in the stone hearth. Alicia drifted in and out of a feverish haze, the scent of smoke and something warm and savory drifting in and out of her senses. Her eyelids fluttered. Each time she surfaced, the world around her shifted. Carter's voice whispering something she couldn't make out. The thud of boots on the wooden floors, the rattle of pans, the rustle of fabric. But when she tried to open her eyes, the light was too sharp, the air too heavy. She finally came to fully when the fire had burned low and the sky outside had dimmed into a bluish haze. Her throat was dry, her limbs sore and heavy, but it was the unfamiliarity of the room that sent her heart racing. She sat up too fast, the pain blooming instantly in her shoulders and ribs, sharp and blinding. She gasped and fell back with a cry, her eyes flying open. A man sat across the room. He looked up when she moved, his posture still, his eyes calm. The beard, the boots, the flannel shirt, it all hit her like a punch. Panic surged through her. She reached instinctively for Carter only to find an empty space where he should have been. "Where's my son?" Her voice was hoarse, but it cut through the silence like glass. The man didn't rise. He just leaned forward slightly and spoke in a low, steady tone. "He's safe. Sleeping. My daughter tucked him in." Alicia blinked, her chest heaving as her thoughts tried to catch up with the facts. Her son, sleeping. A daughter? Her eyes scanned the cabin again, taking in the details she hadn't before. The faded family photos on the wall, the bookshelf lined with worn paperbacks, the patched rug on the floor. This wasn't a stranger's trap. It was someone's home, lived in, cared for. Still, the fear didn't loosen its grip. She stared at him, every muscle in her body rigid. Her voice shook. "Who are you?" He stood then, slowly, as if trying not to startle her. He had a calmness about him that didn't feel rehearsed, but Alicia didn't trust calm. Not in a man she didn't know. Not in a man who looked like him. "Noah," he said, "Noah Mercer." He crossed to the small kitchen, filled a tin cup with water, and brought it to her. She flinched when he approached, and he stopped several feet away, extending the cup with one hand. "You were dehydrated, exhausted. I didn't touch your bag, your wallet, nothing. Your car broke down. Your son waved me down on the highway." She stared at the cup for a long moment, then at him. Then, with trembling fingers, she took at it. The water was cool and clean and tasted like safety should taste, but she still watched him like he might explode. He returned to his chair, giving her space. "You've been out for almost a day," he said. Her grip on the cup tightened. "You should have taken me to hospital." "I would have," Noah said, "but I figured if you wanted cops or doctors, you'd have asked for them. I got the feeling maybe you didn't." He didn't say it like an accusation. He said it like someone who understood things didn't always go the way they should. Alicia didn't answer. She couldn't. Because he was right. She looked down at her arm, noticing now the makeshift brace that held her shoulders still. A shelf board, some fishing line, duct tape. Not elegant, but effective. She remembered falling, the heat, Carter's hand in hers, then nothing. "You did this?" she asked, her voice quieter now. He nodded. "You were hurt. I've done worse fixes on worse wounds. Used to work mountain rescue, before the truck." She looked up again, searching his face for signs of a lie. There were none she could see. Just fatigue, maybe. Sadness. Maybe both. Alicia wrapped the blanket tighter around her, her breath still shallow. "Why did you stop?" she asked. Noah looked at her for a long time. Then he answered simply, "Because your boy looked at me like he didn't expect anyone would." That silenced her, not because she didn't understand, but because she did. The fire hissed, throwing dancing light across the room. Outside, night settled into its bones, pressing cold against the cabin walls. Inside, Alicia tried to steady her racing heart. The world had taught her to be wary, especially of men like him, especially alone, especially now, but Carter had felt safe enough to sleep. That counted for something. Her eyes drifted toward the hallway. "You said your daughter?" "Rowan. She's 6. Neighbor watches her during my routes. She's home now." "Your wife?" He hesitated. "Gone 5 years?" Alicia didn't ask more. The silence felt oddly safe. Later, when Noah had gone to the other room, Alicia sat in the dim glow of the fire, eyes scanning the space. Everything was in plain sight. No weapons, no locks. A kettle sat near the stove. A coat hung on a peg by the door. There was dust on the mantel, but not neglect. This was someone who lived quietly, not someone who lurked. She tried to move her arm and winced. The pain was sharp but clean, not dangerous. She could manage that, she always had. From the hallway came the soft scuffle of footsteps. A small girl appeared, her hair a tangle of curls, dragging a fox-shaped stuffed animal behind her. She peered into the room, then looked at Alicia. "Are you the lady my daddy found?" she asked in a whisper. Alicia blinked. "Yes." The girl crept closer, standing a few feet away. "I'm 6. My name's Rowan. Your boy fixed my flashlight." Alicia's heart thudded. "He did?" Rowan nodded solemnly. "He's kind of magic." She walked forward, gently placing the stuffed fox beside Alicia's pillow. "His name's Kip. You can borrow him until you feel better." Then she turned and disappeared back down the hall, her curls bouncing with each step. Alicia stared at the toy for a long time, then looked toward the empty chair across the room. She didn't say it aloud, but something shifted in her chest. The night passed slowly. Carter woke briefly and padded into the room, curling against her side. His small body was warm, his breathing steady. Alicia stroked his hair gently, her eyes open in the dark. She didn't sleep, not because she didn't want to, but because her guard had been up for so long she didn't know how to set it down. When morning came, light filtered through the curtains in pale stripes, softening the rough edges of the night. The smell of coffee and cinnamon drifted in from the kitchen. Alicia sat up, the pain in her side a little duller now. She walked slowly, barefoot, into the kitchen. Noah stood at the stove, flipping something in a pan. Rowan sat at the table, watching dough rise in a glass bowl like it might perform a trick. No one spoke as Alicia entered. She leaned against the wall, steadying herself. "Morning," Noah said quietly without turning. She nodded. "Smells like a bakery." "I bake on Sundays." She glanced at the calendar. "It's Wednesday." He shrugged. "Still helps the place feel less hollow." That struck something in her. He set a wooden tray on the table in front of her. Scrambled eggs, toast with what looked like homemade blueberry jam, sliced apples with cinnamon. She looked at the food, then at him. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." But he had. She sat slowly, her body still stiff. Carter joined her, eyes still sleepy. He dug into the eggs without hesitation. Alicia took a bite. Her hands didn't tremble as much today. "Carter says your daughter has art supplies," she said. "She does. Draws on everything she's not supposed to. Last week, she drew a dragon inside my toolbox lid." Alicia smiled faintly. It caught her by surprise. She hadn't smiled in a long time. Noah chuckled. "You're good with kids." She raised an eyebrow. "You don't know me?" "I know how your son looked at you when he thought you were gone." She fell silent. After breakfast, Carter disappeared with Rowan, the two of them setting up a fort behind the couch. Alicia stayed in the kitchen, sipping coffee and staring at the steam curling from her mug. Noah stood at the sink, rinsing the pan. "My in-laws said I was unfit," she said quietly. "Said I was unstable, dramatic, that I let Carter grow up angry." He turned slightly, his eyes on her now. "One night, I didn't lock the bedroom door fast enough. They came in. Carter saw everything. I grabbed him and ran." She stared down into her cup. "I've been running ever since." Noah didn't say anything right away. Then he moved toward her, slowly, and handed her a clean dish towel. "You didn't just run," he said. "You survived." The words wrapped around her like armor. She pressed the towel to her eyes. Noah didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. And for the first time in a very long time, she let herself cry. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of the cabin, brushing across the wooden floor like gold dust on old timber. Outside, the forest stirred, pine needles shifting under a soft breeze, birds calling in lazy arcs overhead. The air had changed. There was stillness, but not the kind weighted by silence. It was the quiet of something tentative, something beginning. Inside the cabin, the hush held, but it no longer felt like fear. Alicia moved slowly that morning, her shoulder bound and her side still aching, but her movements were steadier, more deliberate. She made her way across the cabin floor barefoot, her steps cautious on the cool planks. She paused in the doorway to the small kitchen and watched for a moment, unseen. Noah was at the counter, sleeves rolled up, mixing batter in a large ceramic bowl, humming quietly to himself. Rowan stood on a chair beside him, holding a spoon like a conductor's baton, giving orders with the grave importance only children could summon. Her wild curls bounced each time she moved. Carter sat at the table, eyes focused as he fiddled with the base of a cracked flashlight Noah had given him the night before. A screwdriver rested beside him. His brow was furrowed, tongue sticking slightly from the corner of his mouth in concentration. The rabbit with the missing ear lay beside the flashlight like a loyal assistant. Alicia's heart clenched at the sight. It wasn't just that Carter was safe. He looked like he belonged. Like he wasn't preparing to run anymore. She cleared her throat gently, and 3 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Rowan grinned and waved the spoon like a wand. Noah simply nodded. "Hungry?" he asked. She nodded, sitting down slowly. "What are you making?" "Pancakes," Rowan answered for him, "with blueberries and cinnamon and secret stuff." "Secret stuff?" Alicia echoed, raising an eyebrow. Rowan leaned in, whispering conspiratorially, "Vanilla." The pancakes were good. So good that Alicia had to stop herself from eating too quickly, from acting like she hadn't had a real meal in days. She wasn't used to anyone else cooking for her. She wasn't used to trusting the food, but she did. Somehow she did. Carter offered her a bite of his, then returned to the flashlight. Alicia watched him for a moment, noting the way he handled the tool, the way he worked with deliberate care. Noah was watching too. "He's good with his hands," he said. Alicia nodded. "He takes things apart. Sometimes he even puts them back together." Noah smiled faintly. "Looks like he's halfway to rewiring my cabin." "Don't tempt him," Alicia replied. Rowan giggled. After breakfast, the children retreated to the living room, building a fort between 2 armchairs using an old quilt and some couch cushions. Their laughter floated down the hall like warm light. Alicia helped Noah with the dishes, moving slowly but insisting on contributing. He didn't argue. "You don't have to play host," she said after a while. He shrugged. "I'm not." She dried a plate and set it on the stack. "You didn't ask why we were on that road. I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would." "That's rare," she said softly. Noah didn't respond. He rinsed the pan and set it aside. Alicia leaned against the counter, watching him. "I left because people stopped listening," she said. "When Carter got hurt and I tried to speak up, they treated me like I was a problem. Like my anger was a real issue, not what happened to him. They said I was making it racial." Noah turned, drying his hands on a cloth. He didn't interrupt. "I tried everything. Lawyers, letters, protests, but I realized nothing was going to change. Not for him, not there." "You did the right thing," he said simply. She looked at him. "Even if I have nowhere to go?" He met her gaze. "You're not nowhere." That stayed with her. Later that morning, Noah invited Carter to the shed out back, where he kept his tools and old parts from previous repairs. Alicia hesitated but let him go, watching from the porch as the two disappeared around the corner. She could hear Carter's voice, excited and animated. A hammer tapped, a wrench clinked. The occasional curse word slipped from Noah, followed by a whispered apology when he remembered Carter could hear him. Rowan pulled Alicia's hand. "Come sit on the swing with me." The porch swing creaked as they settled in. The wood was worn smooth by time, the chains steady. Alicia felt the sun on her skin for the first time in what felt like years. Real sun, not filtered through a car window or heavy with worry. Rowan kicked her feet, propelling the swing gently. She looked up at Alicia with serious eyes. "You're pretty," she said. Alicia blinked. "Thank you. And your boy is nice. He let me use his flashlight even though it was broken." "That's very sweet of him." Rowan nodded. "He fixed Kip's tail, too." Alicia glanced down and noticed the fox toy had been sewn clumsily but lovingly at the seam of its tail. She swallowed against the lump in her throat. "Thank you for sharing him," Alicia said quietly. Rowan beamed. Later, when the children napped in the fort, Alicia sat with Noah in the kitchen again. The kettle whistled, and he poured tea for both of them. It smelled like mint and chamomile. She watched him closely. The way his movements were calm but sure, unhurried. She hadn't realized how rare that was. "I don't know how to trust this," she admitted after a long silence. He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. "You don't have to." "I'm trying," she said. "That's enough." She looked down at her cup. "I've never had anyone just show up without wanting something." "I've been helped before," Noah said, "when I didn't deserve it." He didn't elaborate, but she saw the shadow pass over his face. "Do you believe people can change?" she asked. Noah thought for a long time. "I believe people show you who they are, eventually, whether they want to or not." She nodded slowly. "I've seen that. Too much." That evening, the kids asked for a campfire. Noah agreed, and they gathered wood together, piling it in the stone ring behind the cabin. As dusk fell, the flames danced into the darkening sky, flickering warm against their faces. Alicia sat close to Carter, and his hand tucked in hers. Rowan leaned against Noah's side, her eyes half closed. Carter poked the fire with a stick. "Can we stay here?" he asked suddenly. Alicia didn't answer. Her throat closed around the words. Noah looked at her, then at Carter. "You're welcome as long as you want." Later that night, after the children were asleep and the fire had burned to embers, Alicia stood on the porch alone. The forest was dark and still. crickets humming in rhythm with the wind. She wrapped the shawl tighter around her shoulders and stared into the trees. Noah stepped out beside her. He didn't speak at first, just stood there. "You're not afraid of me anymore," he said finally. "I am," she replied honestly, "but not in the same way." He nodded. "That's fair." "I spent most of my life afraid," she said, "of losing control, of being wrong, of being seen as angry when I was just tired." He glanced at her. "You don't look angry." She smiled faintly. "Neither do you." The silence stretched again, but it was comfortable now. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. He hesitated. "That this is temporary." She looked at him, and the question rose in her chest before she could stop it. "Does it have to be?" He didn't answer, not with words, but the way he looked at her, quiet, steady, real, was enough. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled, and the children slept in a makeshift fort of cushions and hope. Outside, under the whispering trees and a sky full of stars, two people stood on a porch that had seen many nights, but none quite like this. The world hadn't changed, not yet, but something in them had. And that was a start. By morning, the frost had melted from the pine needles, leaving only droplets that sparkled like glass beads in the sunlight. Birds sang from the high boughs, and somewhere in the woods, the steady tapping of a woodpecker echoed like a distant knock. In the kitchen, the aroma of fresh coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of maple syrup and something buttery from the stovetop. Alicia sat at the small table with her shoulders still in a brace, her dark curls tied back loosely. She wore a long flannel borrowed from Noah, the sleeves rolled up, the hem nearly touching her knees. She felt the stiffness of her heeling ribs each time she shifted, but she bore the discomfort without complaint. Across the room, Carter and Rowan sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by scraps of fabric, paper towel rolls, and an assortment of string, buttons, and broken toys. The project had no clear direction but endless enthusiasm. From time to time, Carter would show Rowan something he'd built, and she'd respond with a breathless, "Whoa," that made Alicia smile in spite of herself. Noah entered the room wiping his hands on a towel. His beard was freshly trimmed, and his shirt carried the faint smell of sawdust and pine. He looked rested, but his eyes, as always, held something quiet behind them, something that had lived in silence too long. "Morning," he said, nodding to Alicia. "Morning. You eat?" She lifted her mug. "Coffee counts." He raised an eyebrow, then poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter. The morning passed with that sort of easy stillness that made time feel softer. They didn't speak much, but the air didn't buzz with tension anymore. It felt like something else now, like a growing understanding that didn't need to be hurried. Noah asked Carter if he wanted to visit the old shed again, and the boy nodded eagerly. Alicia hesitated before giving permission, her gaze lingering on Noah's face just long enough for him to understand. He nodded once, an unspoken promise. In the shed, Carter explored with the fascination of a child in a spaceship. Tools lined the walls, many rusted or worn, but still full of possibility. Noah knelt beside him, showing him how to open the back of an old clock, explaining the way gears talk to each other without ever making a sound. Carter listened with the sharp attentiveness of someone who had learned early to pay attention to what people didn't say. "You ever build something from scratch?" Noah asked. Carter thought. "A wind chime," he said, "out of spoons and keys." Noah smiled. "That counts." Back at the house, Alicia was reorganizing the small bookshelf by the window. Her fingers moved slowly over titles, trailing across spines as though searching for something she didn't know how to name. When she pulled a book from the shelf, a worn copy of The Secret Garden, a sheet of paper fluttered out. She caught it before it hit the ground. It was a photograph, yellowed and creased, of a woman and a child standing in the middle of a snowy yard. The child had Rowan's curls. The woman was smiling, eyes bright with something Alicia had only begun to feel again. She heard the door open and turned. Noah stood in the frame, Carter behind him clutching a small gear in one hand like a treasure. "He fixed it," Noah said. "The flashlight." Carter held it up, pressing the button. A pale beam danced across the floor. Alicia smiled. "You did?" Carter nodded. "It wasn't that hard. The wire was just broken." Noah crouched beside him. "Fixed it better than I could have. You've got something in your hands, kid." Carter looked up at him, a flicker of pride in his eyes. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and shadows stretched long across the clearing, Alicia stood outside with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She watched as Rowan led Carter to a low-hanging branch near the edge of the forest. She whispered something to him and pointed upward. Carter hesitated, looked back toward the cabin, then took hold of the branch. Alicia's heart clenched. Carter had always been afraid of heights. She'd seen him freeze halfway up a ladder once, trembling like a leaf. But this time, he didn't freeze. He climbed, slowly, cautiously, but without turning back. Rowan cheered him on from below, her voice rising in excited bursts. Carter didn't go far, just to the second branch, but when he looked down, he was smiling. Alicia felt tears burn behind her eyes. Noah stepped up beside her, hands in his pockets. "He's braver than he knows," he said. She nodded. "He used to be scared of everything. Not anymore." "He still is," she said quietly. "He just doesn't want to be." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the children. "He trusts you," she added. "I'm trying to be worthy of that." Alicia looked at him then, really looked. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the scar on his knuckle, the way he didn't fill silence with empty words. There was something about him that unsettled her, not because it felt dangerous, but because it didn't. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Alicia helped Noah prepare dinner. She insisted on it. He tried to object, pointing to her arm, but she waved him off. "I worked in a cafe once," she said, "before everything." They moved around the kitchen in a rhythm that surprised them both. Alicia chopped carrots with her good hand while Noah stirred a pot of stew, the room filled with the aroma of garlic and rosemary. They didn't speak about anything heavy, just small things, recipes, music, the weather, but the air was charged with something else, something delicate and new. She paused at one point, setting down her knife. "You ever get tired?" she asked. He looked over, puzzled. "Of what?" She gestured toward the room, the food, the cabin. "Of holding all this together." He was quiet for a moment. "Every day." She studied him. "But then Rowan laughs," he said, "or the light hits the fire just right. Or a stranger wakes up on my couch and reminds me that I still know how to give a damn." Her breath caught. She looked down at her hands. "My in-laws said I was soft," she said. "Said I was too emotional to raise a child on my own." She swallowed hard. "And then, one night, I didn't lock the bedroom door fast enough." Noah's hand stilled over the ladle. "Carter saw everything," she whispered. "I grabbed him. We ran." She couldn't look at him. He put down the ladle gently and stepped toward her. Not too close, but close enough for her to feel his presence. "You didn't run," he said. "You survived." The tears came then, sharp and quiet. She turned away to hide them, but he saw. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't say she'd be okay. He just handed her a clean towel, and for once, she took it. Later, while the children built a fort out of couch cushions and old quilts, Alicia sat by the fire watching the flames dance. The warmth seeped into her skin, and the ache in her chest eased just a little. She turned when Noah entered the room. He carried a tin box in his hands. He sat in the armchair across from her and opened it slowly. Inside were letters, photographs, yellowed scraps of a life once lived. On top, unopened, was an envelope marked with a logo, Marchand Industries. Alicia stared at it, her heart tightening. Noah didn't explain. He didn't need to. He held it like it meant something he hadn't yet dared to face. There was a knock at the door then, a soft, uncertain tapping that broke the stillness. They both looked up, startled. Noah rose, crossing to the door. He opened it, and the wind blew in a swirl of leaves and dusk. On the porch stood Alicia, her eyes wide. "I just remembered something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked past him to the envelope in his hand. "The name Marchand," she said. "My husband worked for them." Noah's fingers tightened on the paper. "He was Julian Marchand," she said, "son of Edward Marchand. He died in a car crash 3 years ago, or they said it was a crash." The cabin fell still. "They blamed me," she continued, "said I seduced him for money, that Carter wasn't really his. They tried to take him from me." Noah stepped back, letting her in. "They said I wasn't good enough," she finished, "that I didn't belong in their family." She looked at the envelope in his hand. "You got that from Marchand?" Noah nodded. "The day after I buried my son." She stared at him, and in that look, so full of grief, fury, disbelief, Noah saw something that wasn't just shared pain. It was shared history. Carter stepped into the room then, rubbing his eyes. He looked from his mother to Noah, then at the envelope. Alicia knelt beside him, gathering him close. Noah stood frozen, the letter trembling slightly in his grip. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering leaves across the porch. Inside, everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. It began in the air. That dense, metallic stillness just before the sky breaks, the kind of weight you feel in your shoulders before your mind registers it's there. The wind died down. The birds quieted. Even the trees stood motionless, as though the forest itself were holding its breath. Noah noticed it first. He stepped out onto the porch just as the sun began to dip behind the ridge, and he felt it crawl down his spine, the familiar tension of an oncoming storm. Not rain, not wind. Something harder, faster. He'd lived in the mountains long enough to know when the weather was coming with teeth. Inside, the cabin was warm, with the glow of lamplight and the scent of cinnamon. Carter and Rowan were curled up near the fire, stringing together buttons and washers with thread, trying to build what they called a space bridge between Saturn and Jupiter. Alicia sat on the couch, one leg curled beneath her, sorting through a small box of donated books from a neighbor. The atmosphere inside was a world away from the heaviness settling outside, and that contrast made Noah uneasy. He stepped back into the cabin, brushing the leaves from his shoulders. "Storm's coming," he said. Alicia looked up from her book. "How bad?" He didn't answer right away, just reached for the stack of towels by the back door. "Fast, strong. We'll want to keep the kids in one room." That was all she needed to hear. She moved into quiet action, folding blankets, tucking one under her arm, calling Carter to help gather their things from the fort they'd built. There was a rhythm to it now, this partnership that had formed wordlessly between her and Noah. No raised voices, no panic, just two people moving in tandem. Noah lit the emergency lanterns and double-checked the propane for the small backup heater. He moved with the confidence of someone who had done this before, but Alicia noticed the way his eyes kept drifting back to the windows. He wasn't worried about the structure. He was worried about what storms did to people. She knew that feeling all too well. When the power went out just after 7, there was no sound, no loud crack, no pop, no warning, just a soft click like a breath being held. The lamps stayed on, the fire still glowed, but the cabin dimmed, and something inside Alicia buckled. She was in the pantry again. It wasn't the same place, not really, but her body didn't know that. Her heart began to race, her vision narrowed, her breath grew shallow. She backed against the wall, pressing her good hand against the wood, her eyes clamped shut. Noah noticed instantly. He crossed the room but didn't touch her. "Alicia," he said softly, "you're here, not there." She didn't answer. "You're not trapped." Her fingers clawed at the wall behind her, her voice caught in her throat. "I've got light. I've got heat. I've got you and Carter and Rowan right here. You're not in that house anymore." Her breathing hitched. "In my house," he continued, his voice steady. "No one gets locked in anywhere. Not ever." She opened her eyes. He stood a few feet away, his hands loose at his sides, the lantern casting a soft circle of light between them. His face was calm, present, real, and slowly, like a fever breaking, her pulse began to slow. She nodded once, then again, and slid down the wall, curling into herself. He crouched near her, not too close, just close enough to hold the silence with her. When Carter padded into the room with Rowan behind him, Kip, the stuffed fox, dangling from her hand, Noah gestured gently toward the children. "We're going to stay in here tonight," he said, "safe and dry." They nodded, sensing the importance in his voice even if they didn't fully understand why. The wind picked up. Outside, trees creaked under the strain. Rain started to fall sideways, sharp and rhythmic against the window panes. The sound of it was like 1,000 small hands trying to get in. Noah moved swiftly, checking the towel rolls at the doors, anchoring the shutters with lengths of rope, stoking the fire higher. Alicia helped him without needing to be asked. Her movements were slower now, but controlled. She checked on the kids, set out extra socks, pulled the old sleeping bags from the cedar chest in the hallway. But the storm wasn't done. Just after 10, a loud crash shook the cabin. Something heavy outside had come down. The lights flickered even in the emergency lamps, and the fire guttered for a moment before flaring back. Rowan screamed. Carter dropped the flashlight. Noah bolted to the front door and pulled it open. "Stay here!" he called over the howling wind. But before he could step out, Alicia grabbed his arm. "Let me." He turned, startled. "What?" "You always save everyone," she said. "Let me do something." He hesitated. Then, before he could answer, Rowan screamed again from the hallway. "Carter! Where's Carter?" The front door swung open with a slam, and Alicia and Noah both turned just in time to see it. The shape of the boy vanishing into the darkness outside, his small frame swallowed by wind and rain. Noah didn't wait. He grabbed his coat, yanked on his boots, and tore into the storm. Alicia was right behind him. Rain lashed at their faces. The cold hit like ice. But they pressed forward, shouting his name into the wind. "Carter!" They followed the faint outline of his footprints in the mud toward the old tree at the edge of the clearing, where a broken swing hung from a bent branch. Alicia's heart was slamming against her ribs so hard she couldn't breathe. Then she heard it. A voice. Small, trembling. "Mom, I dropped it." She ran towards the sound, slipping once, catching herself on her injured arm with a sharp cry. Noah reached her, helped her up, then pointed toward the tree line. There, under the shadow of a fallen branch, was Carter, soaked to the bone. Mud smeared across his face. His hands clutched something tightly. Noah ran first, kneeling in front of him. "Are you hurt?" Carter shook his head. His teeth chattered. "I dropped Kip," he said. "Rowan was scared. I didn't want her to lose him." Noah looked down. In Carter's mud-covered hands was the stuffed fox. A lump rose in his throat. "You're a good brother," he said hoarsely. Carter's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm not her brother." Noah pulled him into his arms, holding him tightly. "You are," he said, "in every way that matters." Back at the cabin, Alicia stripped off Carter's soaked clothes, wrapping him in the dry sleeping bag. She sat beside him, brushing his wet hair from his forehead, her lips trembling. Noah knelt across from her, building the fire back up. Rowan handed him a bundle of kindling without a word. Her eyes were wide but steady. Alicia looked at him over Carter's head. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't answer, just nodded. When the storm passed sometime after midnight, the world outside the cabin looked different. Trees leaned at new angles. Leaves plastered the windows. The wind had calmed, but the silence it left behind was thick with meaning. Inside, Carter and Rowan lay asleep on a shared cot, Kip tucked between them. Alicia sat in the rocking chair by the fire, her shoulder bandaged, her legs wrapped in a quilt. Noah sat on the floor beside her, back against the hearth. Neither spoke. Not for a long time. Then Alicia reached out and took his hand. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was real. A choice, a beginning. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the truth she hadn't dared to believe for years. He wasn't going to leave. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to run anymore. The morning after the storm arrived not with thunder, but with quiet. The rain had passed in the night, leaving the world washed and still, the forest softened by mist that clung to the pines and crept between the trees. Water dripped steadily from the cabin's eaves, and puddles dimpled with ripples as the wind brushed the surface. From the porch, the ridge was hidden behind a low curtain of fog, as if the land itself needed time to exhale. Inside, the cabin was warm. Not from the fire alone, though it still glowed gently in the hearth, but from the faint sounds of breath and quiet laughter and the slow rhythm of people settling into something like peace. The children had built a new fort by the bookshelves, this one reinforced with chairs and pillows, a banner of paper scraps hanging across the top that read, "Mission Control." Alicia sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea cradled in her hands, her eyes trailing over the steam curling into the air. Her body was still sore, the bruises beginning to fade into yellows and muted purples. Her arm, better supported now in a proper sling Noah had put together the night before using fabric from an old flannel shirt and a yard of canvas. She watched Carter from across the room, his head bent as he carefully rewired the base of a broken clock, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Rowan sat beside him with a magnifying glass, solemnly inspecting every piece he handed her before placing it into a row on the floor like a museum curator. Alicia didn't speak, didn't interrupt. She simply observed the way her son moved, how he focused, how he carried himself. He looked like a boy again. Not a child preparing to defend himself, not the wary figure he'd been for so long, but a child in motion, in thought, in joy. Noah appeared from the back hallway, wiping his hands on a towel. His face was still touched by sleep, his hair damp from a quick rinse, a clean gray shirt hanging loosely on his frame. He moved through the kitchen without speaking, refilled the kettle, set it on the stove. The silence between him and Alicia was no longer sharp or cautious. It was something else now, something patient, built from shared weight. They moved like people who had already spoken the heavy things. He poured her another cup without asking and sat across from her. "He fixed the cuckoo clock this morning," Noah said, nodding toward Carter. "It hasn't worked in 15 years. I'd given up on it." "He said he liked the gears," Alicia murmured. "Said they made sense." Noah smiled faintly. "Most people want things to just work. Your son wants to know why." She looked at him, then down into her tea. "He's not normal," she said. Noah leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "No, he's not. He's remarkable." Alicia blinked, caught off guard by the ease with which he said it. "Schools never knew what to do with him," she said. "They either ignored him or tried to break him down into manageable pieces." "He doesn't need managing," Noah said. "He needs building." They sat in silence for a while after that. Outside, the mist began to lift, revealing the shape of the forest again. Sunlight filtered through the wet branches, sending flashes of gold across the clearing. The world, Alicia thought, looked like it had been scrubbed clean. Later that day, while Rowan and Carter climbed the low branches of the trees near the edge of the yard, Noah found Alicia sitting on the porch steps with a notebook in her lap. She wasn't writing, just staring down at the blank page. "I've been thinking," she said as he approached. "Dangerous," he teased. She smiled, but her expression didn't shift fully. "I don't want to run anymore," she said, "but I don't know what that means." Noah sat beside her, stretching his legs out in front of him. "It could mean staying," he said. "Would it be safe?" "I can't promise that," he said, "but I can promise you wouldn't be alone." She looked at him then, long and searching. He didn't flinch under her gaze. "There's an old schoolhouse," he said after a moment, "down the ridge about a mile from here. Closed during the pandemic, never reopened. The state left it to rot. Some of us talked about buying it up, turning it into a community space. Never got far, but it's still there." She frowned slightly, processing. "You want to turn it into a school?" He shrugged. "Or a workshop, or a library, or all three. Carter could teach us all a thing or two. Rowan could run the place by the time she's 8. "I used to teach," Alicia said quietly. "Before everything, art and storytelling, mostly elementary kids." He looked at her. "Then maybe that's what it means, not running. Maybe it means teaching again." The idea settled between them. It didn't feel like a plan. It felt like a door being left open. The next day, they drove down the ridge. The old schoolhouse was just as Noah described: weathered red brick, a cracked bell above the entry, vines curling up the side of the walls. The front steps were chipped, the door swollen from years of humidity. But when Alicia stepped inside, her breath caught. The windows still let in light. The floors creaked but held. Chalkboards lined the walls, dusty but intact. Desks were scattered, some missing legs, others broken, but they were there. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Carter ran to the corner of the main room and knelt beside a pile of broken electronics. He picked up a busted radio and turned it over in his hands. "I could fix this," he said. Alicia looked at him, then at Noah. "It's not just about staying," she said. "It's about building something." Noah nodded. "Exactly." Over the next week, they worked together. Noah made calls. Neighbors dropped off tools, wood, old furniture. A retired superintendent visited, curious, skeptical, then stayed 3 hours and left with a list of ideas and a promise to return. Alicia cleaned every window herself. Rowan scrubbed the chalkboards. Carter drew a schematic for a solar battery pack he wanted to install on the roof. Noah repaired the floorboards with wood salvaged from a barn 3 towns over. They didn't have money, but they had time. They had hands. They had each other. The day the first family showed up, an older couple with their granddaughter, a quiet child who hadn't returned to school since lockdown, Alicia didn't know what to say. The girl clung to her grandfather's coat and stared at the dusty floor with wide eyes. Carter stepped forward, offered her a piece of candy, and showed her where the crayons were. And that was it. That was the beginning. That night, back at the cabin, Alicia sat on the porch with Noah, watching the fireflies blink between the trees. "I've never had this before," she said. "This?" he asked. She nodded. "A place. A real place. Not just shelter." He didn't speak for a while. Then he reached over and gently took her hand. "You built it," he said. She squeezed his fingers. "No, we did." In the morning, Carter found a scrap of wood and carved a sign. He painted it in bold strokes, carefully shaping each letter with the tip of a bent screwdriver. He hung it over the old bell at the front of the school. It read, "Home." And when Alicia saw it, her knees went weak, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. Because it was true. For the first time in her life, it was true. Autumn arrived like a memory, soft at first, barely noticeable. The nights grew cooler, the leaves began their slow shift from green to rusted gold, and the ridge filled with the rustle of change. The schoolhouse buzzed with quiet life. Children came in ones and twos, some shy, some wide-eyed, most unsure of what exactly they had walked into. But they stayed. And each day, the rooms that once sat empty and echoing now carried voices, footsteps, and laughter that made the walls feel warm again. Carter took to the school like it was his invention. He mapped out circuits for a lighting project, rewired a broken speaker system, and created a pulley that opened the window shades with a tug of string. Rowan became his unofficial assistant, eager to learn and bossy enough to keep him in check. Alicia stood before a class again, sometimes of 4, sometimes 10, guiding hands in painting, showing how to sketch perspective, reading aloud from old children's books that she once thought she would never open again. The children listened, not just to her words, but to her presence. There was something in the way she stood at the front of the room now, not hard or guarded, but grounded, like someone who had weathered enough to finally know she could stay. Noah built benches from reclaimed wood. He repaired every broken hinge in the building, added a new lock to the back door, and constructed a coat rack that somehow became the hallway's meeting point for both arguments and after-class storytelling. He didn't teach in the traditional sense, but he taught by being there, always there, fixing, supporting, making space for Alicia to do what she was born to do, and for Carter to grow into someone who no longer flinched at kindness. One afternoon, while the kids were outside racing paper airplanes and Rowan was scolding Carter for gluing hers shut, Alicia stood at the chalkboard finishing a lesson on color mixing when Noah entered the room with a letter in his hand. She recognized the seal before she saw the words. Marchand Industries. He didn't speak, just handed it to her. She didn't ask how he'd received it. She only opened it. The letter was short, direct. A request for a meeting, not from a legal team, from Edward Marchand himself. "I want to come in person," he had written, "not with lawyers, not with threats, but with the truth, if you'll have me." Alicia's fingers trembled as she folded the letter. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. 3 days later, the car arrived. It didn't belong, not in that part of the world. A 1970s Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, polished deep navy blue, gliding silently down the gravel road like a ghost from another life. It stopped just shy of the schoolhouse entrance, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Then the rear door opened. Edward Marchand stepped out. He wore a dark wool coat over a tailored vest. His white hair was combed back, his cane tapping softly as he crossed the dirt path. He looked older than in any photo Alicia had ever seen. Not just from age, but from carrying too much too long. His face was thinner, his eyes duller, but he stood straight, his shoulders squared like a man accustomed to being watched. Carter stood in the doorway, Rowan beside him. Alicia came to the threshold a breath later, Noah appearing just behind her. Edward stopped a few feet away. He removed his hat. "I didn't come with apologies I haven't earned," he said. Noah stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Alicia and the older man, not threatening, just steady. "You came a long way to say something," Noah said. "I did," Edward replied. He looked at Alicia. "You're thinner than I remember, but you're standing. I didn't know if you would be." Alicia didn't answer. Her arms were folded across her chest, but her feet stayed planted. Edward turned to Carter. "I knew who you were the moment I saw your photo," he said. "You have your father's eyes, and your mother's spine." Carter didn't speak. Edward dropped his gaze, then raised it again. "I failed him. My son. I failed you. I failed your mother. I watched things happen and told myself it was too late to stop them. But the truth is, I was just too proud to admit I was wrong." He looked at Noah next. "You're the man who picked them up on the side of the road." Noah gave a slight nod. Edward exhaled. "Then thank you. You did what I didn't." There was silence after that. Long, heavy, real. Rowan tugged on Carter's sleeve and whispered something. He didn't respond, just stepped forward. "If I take your name," Carter said, voice clear and small, "do I lose the one I have now?" Edward looked surprised. "No," he said. "The world might call you something different, but what you choose to be called is always yours." "And if I don't want both?" Carter asked. "Then I'll respect that." Carter turned back to Noah. "Do I have to go with him?" Noah shook his head. "You never have to go anywhere you don't want to." Carter looked at Alicia, then at Rowan, then back to Edward. "I want to stay here," he said. "I want to build things that don't just end up in stores. I want to fix things. I want to go to this school. With them." Edward nodded slowly. "Then that's what you'll do." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. Inside was a silver ring. "It belonged to your father," he said. "He never wore it. Said it felt like a chain, but he kept it." Carter took it. He didn't put it on, just held it. Edward stepped back. "Thank you for hearing me." He turned to Alicia. His voice faltered now. "I'm sorry I left you alone. I can't undo what I allowed to happen, but if there's any way I can make things right, I'd like to try." Alicia's eyes didn't soften, but they didn't harden either. "We built something here," she said, "and you're not going to take it." "I wouldn't dream of it." They watched him return to the car, cane tapping softly, breath visible in the cooling air. He got in. The door closed, the engine hummed, and the car rolled back down the gravel path and disappeared. That evening, the children fell asleep under the stars in a tent they'd pitched in the backyard. Rowan curled against Carter, and Kip the fox lay between them like a guardian. Alicia sat beside Noah on the porch, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. "You believe him?" she asked. "I believe he regrets it." She was quiet for a long time. "I wanted to hate him," she said. "You still can." She smiled slightly. "But I also wanted to be seen." "You were." The moon rose slow and yellow over the trees. Later, Alicia found herself in the classroom alone. She stood in front of the chalkboard reading the words Carter had written earlier that day. What makes something worth building? She thought of the broken car, the empty road, the shed, the first fire, the bruises, the bread, the tears, the gear in Carter's fingers, the sign that said home. She picked up the chalk and added beneath the question, love and time. Then she turned off the lights and locked the door. Months passed, the seasons turned, the school grew, families joined, children laughed. Rowan became the de facto mayor of the lunchroom. Carter started a repair club for local kids. Alicia taught not just art, but storytelling. And Noah stayed, steady, present, unwavering. One afternoon in early spring, with sunlight streaming through the windows and the air full of sawdust and voices, Alicia turned to Noah as they cleaned the porch. "I love you," she said. He didn't blink. He didn't pause. "I love you too." They married in the clearing behind the school. Nothing fancy, just enough chairs, just enough flowers, just enough people who had walked with them through every storm. Carter stood beside Noah. Rowan scattered flower petals. Alicia wore a cream dress with a ribbon the color of the leaves that had once cushioned her fall. When Carter gave a speech, he stood in front of the gathered neighbors, his voice strong. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere," he said, "but now I know. You don't have to be born into a family to find one. You just need someone to stop when you need them most." He turned toward Noah. "You stopped," he said, and Noah, who had once lost everything, smiled as a boy who called him father spoke those words aloud. A few years later, Carter would return to that same bend in the road with a small wooden stake in his hand and a sign he'd carved himself. He knelt beside the ditch where his mother once lay unconscious and pressed the sign into the earth. The words read, "Here, someone stopped, and everything changed." And the wind that moved through the trees seemed to whisper back, "Yes, it did." If this story moved you, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Share this video with someone who still believes in second chances. And let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Thank you for being here.